Many thanks, Professor. Dear colleagues, first of all, I would like to thank for the opportunity to speak. Yes, I have to admit I'm also one of the presenters who failed to connect the dots, so I have to admit that the topic of my presentation is maybe not so closely connected with the general topic, but I was trying to find some connecting links. To be honest, it's not that easy, so I decided that I will construct one, and it will be in the level of a joke. And the connection between the topic of circular economy and the topic of my presentation is the problem of circular legislation, because in Slovakia, since I pay attention to public construction law, basically every single year when I start to teach the course of administrative law, I start with the information for the students that there is an ongoing process of reshaping or recodification of public construction law in the Slovak Republic, and it is true at least for 15 years. So I've seen a number of proposals of new laws concerning this area of law. Some of them were more successful, some less, but they have something in common. The majority of them ended as garbage in the trash bin, but some aspects, some institutes, some norms are reused and reiterated. So maybe that's something similar to circular economy, circular legislation. And I have great examples, in fact, on my first slide. Because one of the chapters of this never-ending story of reshaping of public construction law in Slovakia was written in 2022, and at first it seemed to be a very successful one, because at last two new acts were adopted concerning the two crucial pillars of public construction law, that is land use planning or spatial planning, and construction law itself. Of course, for the topic of my presentation, the first act you can see on the slide is of crucial importance, but I also wanted to mention the other one. Both these acts were supposed to enter into force this year on April 1st. However, the entry into force of the Act on Construction was postponed by 12 months, and as you can see, it's probably never going to happen, because meanwhile we have a new proposal. It was already created by the Ministry of Transport, and probably it is going to abolish the effective Construction Act, and also this new one. That means that the Act on Construction from the year 2022 will probably never come into force. So maybe this year we'll have three acts on construction in Slovakia. One of them, or maybe all three of them, will be valid, but only one will be in force, of course. And next year we shall see, because honestly I refuse to believe that the new act will come into force next year, because that would be a very short period to adopt for the construction offices and for all the authorities, for the developers and so on. So I hope they will change their mind, because as of now it's proposed the entry into force should be 1st April next year, but I hope it will change, because as we have seen recently in Czech Republic, ill-prepared legislation can have very heavy political impacts and social impacts. So I don't believe that will happen. But basically this had not too much to do with the topic of my presentation. I only wanted to mention it because I'm going to speak about the one act from this reform from 2022 that actually entered into force on 1st April of this year, albeit it was amended, I think, 4 times before it even entered into force. So I'm going to talk about participation of the public, but also of landowners and owners of constructions in the process of creating or procuring of spatial planning documentation. First, I would like to mention some new features of this new legislation, new act on spatial planning that somehow concern the assessment of strategic documents, because that's probably the most important feature for the purpose of my presentation. The point is the previous legislation that was Act on Spatial Planning and Construction from the year 1976. It did not govern the connecting dots between procuring of land use documentation and the CEA at all. So when we paid attention to these two overlapping processes, that is the creation of spatial planning documentation and the assessment of strategic documents. All the connecting links were regulated only by the law on environmental impact assessment. So there was no rules on this in the Construction Act at all. So now the new Act on Spatial Planning at last involves also on the side of spatial planning the regulation of the links between these two processes. It for example, governs the competencies of the CEA assessment bodies and so on. So this is one huge step forward in my opinion. When it comes to the status of the public and of natural persons and legal entities under the Act on Spatial Planning in this process, in principle, we could say that their rights, their position was strengthened, but by the new legislation, at least in some ways. For example, the previous act also governed the, albeit indirectly, the right to file some motions for changing of the existing spatial planning documents, but there was no obligation, no duty of the spatial planning authority governed to handle these motions. So there was a right to file them, but it was not explicitly stated in the act what should the authority to do with them. So basically they could also ignore it. In the new legislation, there is rather specific regulation how this should work. So there is an obligation of the authority to tackle such motions. First of all, there is a new legal institute of a database of such motions. So if, for example, landowner files a motion to amend the spatial planning documentation, the competent authority has to include it into the database of such motions, and at the next possible opportunity when it evaluates the need of changing or amending the spatial planning documentation, it's a duty of this authority to tackle this motion. So this is one of the new features of the new act that show that really the legal position, the status of the public and of natural persons and legal entities improved, is strengthened. It's probably not a surprise to you that our administrative procedure code does not apply to the process of creating land use planning documentation. Of course, it's a rather a normative act. So since our administrative procedure code only regulates decisions in individual matters, it's clear that we can't apply it. Therefore, the public and also specific persons like landowners do not have rights of participants in the proceedings. Therefore, key elements of their inclusion and participation in these processes are in the level of publicity of this process. So, simply put, they have rights to be informed about the ongoing process, so when it was commenced and how it goes. And also forms of participations. For example, there are the institutes of public hearings, the possibility to file objections, and so on. Rights and tools that the public does not have. For example, there is no right to file remedies or the possibility to initiate a judicial inquiry in the administrative judiciary. So, for example, the concerned landowner is not allowed or has not the possibility to file an action in administrative justice against a land use plan. This right is only in the hands of the prosecutor's office. So the prosecutor's office, in case the prosecutor would evaluate that there was some violation of law, either in the process of creating the land use plan or in the content of the land use plan itself, the prosecutor has the right to file a so-called protest. So it's a specific remedy under the Act on Prosecution. And in case that the special planning authority fails to somehow accept this protest, in such a case, the prosecutor's office has the right of initiating a judicial inquiry. So even for the public and for the natural persons and legal entities, probably the strongest and most effective mean of legal protection when it comes to the legal regulation of spatial planning still is the possibility to file a motion to the prosecutor to look into, for example, some irregularities in the process of creating a land use plan. Until now, I spoke about the status and the rights of the public and of natural persons and legal entities under the new Act on Spatial Planning, but of course, and I have already mentioned it, that's only one part of the legislation that concerns this process, because land use plans are strategic documents that has to be evaluated under the EEA Act. So they are evaluated in the process of assessing the impact of strategic documents. So there is also a set of rights according to this act that the affected public has to its disposal. So, for example, the affected public, that's a term that this act uses, so it's not the interested public, it's the affected public. In the assessment of the impacts of strategic documents has the right to participate in the preparation and assessment of the impacts of the strategic documents until the approval of the strategic document, including the right to submit a written opinion, participation in consultations and public discussions of the strategic document. According to our Code of Administrative Justice, the affected public has the right to file, for example, an administrative action against the decision and the measure. For example, in case that there is a so-called examination procedure concerning a strategic document with local impacts, and that there would be a discovery that this document should not be examined under the CEA. In such a case, the affected public in the end has the right to file such an action or lawsuit. It also has the right to file a lawsuit against inactivity and also against a generally binding regulation. So in the end, under the Code of Administrative Justice, in connection with the EIA Act, there is a possibility in the end that the affected public could file a lawsuit against a generally binding regulation that approved the land use plan documentation. So in the end, there is a way how this lawsuit could be filed, not according to the Act on Spatial Planning, but according to these later mentioned acts. I don't have a knowledge about an actual case where this lawsuit was used in this way, but I see there should be a possibility to do that in the end. So the conclusions, there are some partial improvements when it comes to the status of the public and of natural persons and legal entities in terms of legal protection in the new Act on Spatial Planning, but still the most or the more robust legal protection still rests in the level of the regulation of the evaluation of strategic documents under the EIA Act. But still, there are some clear improvements in this new act. For example, at least we now have a legislation governing the spatial planning that governs these links between spatial planning and CEA process. So that would be all from me. Thank you for your attention.